Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today with you. So glad everything worked out in the end, and I was able to make it with 9 minutes to spare. My driver was so happy when he got me here because I told him it was urgent. Um, so thank you, everyone. I'm really looking forward to the questions from the panel and also from the audience. And I thought it was really interesting when I heard yesterday that there was going to be an artist here painting me while I'm speaking, which is it has never happened to me before. That's a new experience for me, and I'm really looking forward to how it turns out. And yeah, feel free to make me look pretty, okay? Uh, yeah, so I thought because we have a painting going on while I'm speaking, I thought maybe I could talk a little bit about art in relation to writing a novel versus writing a memoir, which is, I've done both. And when people always ask me, like, what's the difference between writing a novel or writing a memoir, I always say, well, writing a novel is like making a painting because you start with a blank canvas and you put down the image, you draw your sketch, and then you start laying down one paint at a time, one color at a time, and you create the world. That's what a novelist does. You create the world, you create the characters, the situation, all of that happens in your story. When you write a memoir, it's the opposite. It's like making a sculpture. So think of your life as a big block of granite or wood, and you have to free the image from that block of wood. And once you decide what that image is going to be, you start chipping away, chipping away, chipping away, chipping away. That's writing a memoir, because when you write memoir, you're writing about years of your life, so many experiences that you've lived through, but you cannot write it all, because that's not what memoir is. Memoir has to have a specific story, a specific theme. And once you decide what the theme is going to be, what that image is going to be, that's when you start to pick and choose what are those experiences that you're going to write about. And what you put in is just as important as what you leave out. And that's the same thing with the sculpture. What you leave in is just as important as what you're chipping away. So that's kind of what I've come to understand of memoir writing versus novel writing. I think they're both just as challenging. At least for me, I found both forms very challenging for their own reasons. But I've come to discover that for me, memoir has been the most rewarding, because when I write fiction, I discovered that I was kind of hiding behind my fiction. I was writing about my own personal experiences. Like, for example, my first novel, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to read it, Across 100 Mountains. It's inspired by my own experiences with immigration, with family separation. It's the story of a young girl living in poverty in Mexico whose father decides to come to the US because he wants to build his family a home. And that's based on my own experience of my father coming here because he wanted to build us a house in Mexico and get us out of, that poverty that we lived in. But in my story, in the novel, the father never comes back. He never returns to Mexico. And the story becomes about, how does this girl survived this experience of her father never coming back, her mother completely falling apart, and then eventually she decides that she has no choice but to leave her hometown in Mexico and go in search of her father and find out what happened to him and why he never came home. And when I wrote that book, I really wanted it to be a memoir, but I was 22 at the time, and I thought, well, maybe I'm a little too young to write memoir. because I had just gone through all of these experiences, and I wasn't mature enough to be able to understand them yet, and I hadn't been able to really reflect on the experiences. I was still suffering from the trauma of what had happened. So in turning it into fiction, it allowed me to create a character to stand in for me. So I created this girl, Juana, and whenever I wrote scenes that were taken from my experience that were really difficult to write, I would always tell myself, well, that's happening to Juana, it's not happening to me. And that's how I managed to put a little distance between my own story. And that's what fiction did for me. It gave me that distance I needed to be able to write the book without getting emotionally blocked. So in doing that, though, again, fiction allowed me to kind of hide from my experience, from my reality, and not fully confront the things that had happened to me. So after I finished these two novels and I started working on the distance between us, it was very difficult to all of a sudden be the main character in the book. Like there was no more hiding. You know, I was the main protagonist in the story. I was writing about all these things that happened to me. There was no more hiding anymore. I had to fully relive everything. And that was a very painful process for me. It took me 4 years to get through the book. But at the end of the writing, I felt so much freedom, you know, and completely liberated. And I felt that I could finally put my past to rest and feel just a little lighter and not have to carry all of it on my back. And that's what memoir did for me that fiction was not able to do for me. It didn't set me free the way my memoir did. So that was my experience with writing memoir. And I don't know if you guys know that I went to a community college. I'm a product of a community college. I'm very proud of that. I went to Pasadena City College. So just going back to that painting there, how's it going? How's it looking? I'm okay, good? All right. So going back to the painting, you know, when I saw it, I was just thinking about how when I was at Pasadena City College, and when I started there, I actually wanted to be an art major. You know, I wanted to be an artist and paint, and that's what I wanted to do. And I took my English 1A class with Diana Savas, who still teaches there at PCC. And Diana was the first teacher to tell me that I had writing talent. She was the first one to encourage me and to tell me that I should be a writer. But I wanted to be a painter, and I told her that I wanted to be a painter. And but she kept telling me that I should be a writer, and I should be a writer. And then one time she saw me working on a painting. I was doing like a still life of vegetables or something. And she came to stand behind me and watch me paint. And, you know, I was trying to show off my painting skills. And she was standing looking over my shoulder. And I thought, now she's going to see how good I am at painting, and she's going to leave me alone about the writing. And Diana looks at me and she's like, Reynita, you're better off being a writer. And that was the end of my painting career. So in a way, it was good because I should leave the painting to the ones that know how to do it. And because I came to the realization that I wasn't that good of a visual artist, I decided, well, I'm going to paint with words then. That's what I'm going to do. And so that's kind of what I strive to do with my writing is I'm painting with words. And I think I found my calling, and I think my teacher was right to kind of lead me into this direction of writing. And I'm very grateful to her to have done that for me, to guide me and encourage me, and to constantly praise me for my work and tell me that I was talented and that my stories mattered. And she would give me books by Latina writers and say, you know, if Sandra Cisneros can do it, you can do it. If Isabel Allende can do it, you can do it. And she was my own little Cesar Chavez, you know, like always like, si se puede, si se puede. And she said it to me so many times that eventually I believed it. And so when I transferred to UC Santa Cruz, I transferred as a creative writing major. And that's what I decided that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna tell stories. I was gonna write. And in my way, I guess for me, one of the reasons why I want to write is to fight against the border of invisibility that I see, especially, Latino writers, and our stories oftentimes get pushed aside, don't get acknowledged, don't get read. And for me, it's important to fight against that and to constantly, have to remind people that we're here, that we are part of the American experience, and our story should be part of American literature. So that's something that really drives me in terms of writing, of being able to use my stories as a way to remind people that we're here and that we belong and that we're part of this community as much as anybody else is. So that's what I try to do. So what I want to do is I want to share a few excerpts from my books, and then I'm gonna make sure I leave time for the panel because that's the one that I really want to get to. I think that's really exciting to have these students here, and I can't wait to hear, what kind of questions they came up with about my work. So I don't know if you guys have heard that I just turned in my first draft of my new memoir to my editor 2 weeks ago. And it's a sequel to The Distance Between Us. And it picks up where The Distance Between Us leaves off, which is when I head over to UC Santa Cruz to become the first in my family to go to a university. And in the sequel, I'm trying to write about, capture that experience of a first generation university student, which I think I share that experience with many of our Latino students who are, first generation, and the challenges of that, of being, learning your way and not knowing how to be a university student, and trying to figure out things on your own. So I try to capture that experience, and then also I write about what it was like to graduate from college with, very big dreams, and not knowing how to make those dreams come true, and all the challenges that I had to overcome in order to make it happen. So I capture, I guess, becoming my own person, becoming a woman, figuring out, what kind of woman I want to be. And the theme of that book was the search for a home. And so that's something that for me has been, I think it has been very important for my whole life, is that search for a home, wanting that home, that desire to have a home. And I feel it's because when I was little and my father decided to come to the United States to make money so that he could build us a house, in wanting to build us a house, he destroyed our home, which is, to me, it's like the biggest irony of my life. That here's my father having this dream of building us a house made of brick and concrete, and he came to the US to work really hard to make that money so that he could build us a house. But in the process of building this house, our home was completely destroyed. And so I lost my home as a little girl. And then when I came to the US to live with my dad, to be reunited with this man I hadn't seen in 8 years, I tried to kind of put the pieces back of that home together, and we were never really able to do that. So coming to the US to live in LA with my father, the whole time I lived with him, I was constantly yearning for a home, and I wasn't able to find it. And so I write about, how immigration impacted my family, and that family separation, has really deep consequences. And it was that longing for a home. And my father's house was never a home. There was too much abuse going on. He was an alcoholic, and my siblings and I had to deal with a lot of instability and dysfunction. So that never felt like a home. And then when I went to Santa Cruz, I was in for a lot of like culture shock, because I went to a campus that at the time, the Latino population was very small, and I struggled to make that into a home. And it was, the constant search for home, making a home, and not being able to find it. And while I was in Santa Cruz, I came upon a quote by Gloria Ansaldúa that says, "I am a turtle. Wherever I go, I carry home on my back." And I remember that quote and feeling like that's what I need to do. I need to become a turtle. I need to learn how to carry home on my back so that I could take it with me wherever I go, so that I could stop feeling homeless. And that was what I kind of strive to do, to create a home that I could carry, to not feel so homeless anymore, and to finally, stop searching for home and to finally find one. So that's kind of what I'm writing about in this new book, is that, that search for this home. How do I become a turtle? How do I learn to carry my home? So those are things that I've been exploring in the new book, so I can't wait to share that with you. So the excerpts that I'm just gonna read two excerpts that touch on home, because that, to me, that has been a very big deal for me in my life, the search for home. So I'm gonna read the chapter in The Distance Between Us, where my father, it took him a few years to finally save some money to start building us the house in Mexico. So this is the chapter when the house finally starts getting built. 4 years after Papi left for the United States, and 2 years after Mommy left, the construction of our house finally began, which could only mean one thing: my parents would soon be back. Papi had told us about his dream house in the letters he had sent to Mommy from El Otro Lado. The house would be made of brick with the shiny concrete floor. It would have 3 rooms, tall white windows to let in the sunlight, and walls painted the color of Mommy's blue eyeshadow. He wanted a house with a television, a stereo, a refrigerator, and a stove. A house with electricity, gas, and running water, and maybe even an indoor bathroom, one with a shower that made you feel as if you were standing in the rain on a sticky, hot summer day. My grandmother had given my father a piece of her property, so our house was going to be built next to hers. Mago, Carlos, and I weren't happy about that. We didn't want to live next to Abuela Avila, but it would save my parents money, so it was the only option they had. Workers came early one morning to tear down the outhouse and the shack in which I'd been born. I stood there watching, feeling sad that my little shack was being destroyed. My sister put an arm around me and said, "Just think about what is going to be built right there on that spot." The workers returned the next day and the day after and the day after, and began to lay the foundation, and after that, the walls. As soon as school let out, Mago, Carlos, and I ran down the hill to help. Carlos worked especially hard. He was quick and steady with the bricks and the buckets of mortar. We scraped our fingers carrying bricks. At night, we couldn't sleep from being so sore. But every day we put all of our energy into building our house, and when our fingers hurt too much or our knees wanted to buckle from under us as we carried buckets of wet mortar to the bricklayers, we would tell ourselves that the faster we worked, the faster we would have a family again. That thought gave us strength. But it wasn't long before the workers stopped coming. By the time February came to an end and Carlos turned 9, the workers were nowhere in sight. Abuela Vila said, "Your parents have no more money, so the house has to wait." We stood by the door every morning before going to school, hoping to see the truck that brought the construction workers coming down the dirt road. Then we headed to school, where all we did was look at the window and sigh the hours away, leaning our sorrow on our elbows. By the end of the week, Mago stopped looking down the dirt road. She pushed Carlos and me up the hill and said that it didn't matter anyway. No matter how many bricks and buckets of mortar we helped carry, the house would never be done because it was just a foolish dream, just as silly as our dream of having a real family again. "It will get finished," Carlos said. "They will come back." He took off running up the hill, and by the time we got to the gate of our school, he was nowhere in sight. When we got back from school, I went inside to look at my father's photograph, at the man behind the glass. "How much longer? How much longer will you be gone?" As always, there was no answer. All right, so that's the story about the house that my father dreamed about, and he managed to have it built, but by the time he built it, everything had changed. My parents got divorced while they were here in the US, and my father remarried. Eventually, my mother remarried, and the Mexican economy kept getting worse, so there was nothing to go back to. Even though my father had built this house, there were no jobs to go back to, so he decided that he couldn't go back to Mexico anymore, and that was why we ended up coming to live with him in Los Angeles. And you know, and to me, like, the biggest tragedy was how long it took to build that house, how much work my siblings and I put into building the house, and yet we never lived in it. So that to me, I just found it a very tragic thing that happened. But this other excerpt I want to share with you before we start the panel is from the new book. In the new book, I'm still writing about my relationship with my parents, and I'm still writing about, you know, that distance that separates us. So this chapter takes place about a year or so after I returned from Santa Cruz. One day, my father called to ask me for a favor. I was surprised that he phoned me. I could count the number of times we'd spoken to each other with one hand since I graduated from UC Santa Cruz and had returned to Los Angeles. What surprised me, though, was that he was asking for a favor. It was so unlike him. "I was wondering if I could stay at your house until I find a place of my own, maybe just a month," he said. Not too long before, my father made a bad investment. He sold his house in Highland Park and moved to Adelanto, a town over an hour and a half drive from LA. My cousin convinced him that houses were dirt cheap in Adelanto, and he could have a nice big house with a big yard for half the price. But my cousin failed to mention that there were no jobs in Adelanto, and my father had no choice but to ask for his former job back in Culver City. "It's too long of a drive," he told me. That was an understatement. Without traffic, the drive from Adelanto to Culver City was almost 2.5 hours each way. I never thought I would ever live with my father again. When I left his house for Santa Cruz, I vowed I would never, ever live with him again. When I returned to Los Angeles, I struggled to make it on my own, sleeping for 6 months on my brother's living room couch, trying to find a job to pay back my student loans. Now I was a full-time teacher for LAUSD, a single mom, and at 26 years old, a proud homeowner. Now here was my father wanting to come live with me. Okay, I said. I offered him my son's bedroom, but he refused. Instead, he moved into the detached garage, which was nothing but studs and stucco, barren and dark. It was not a finished room, not comfortable in the least, but he was used to worse. As a child, he had lived in shacks where he slept on a straw mat over a dirt floor. In the US, he had never gotten used to beds, and often through his years living with my stepmother, she would wake up to find him sleeping on the hard, unforgiving floor. It was one of the ways his childhood still haunted him. Now he was at my house, and for the most part, he kept to himself. He made a point to leave the house as early as possible, so I never saw him, although sometimes I would wake up and hear the shower running. That was the only way I knew he was actually here. He would come home late, and most of the time he entered through the patio door and didn't even come into the house. It angered me that he went out of his way to avoid me. I knew he did it as to not inconvenience me. He thought that staying away would make things better so that I wouldn't think of him as a burden. I didn't know how to tell him that I wanted his company, that I yearned for it, that I wanted to sit and have coffee with him in the mornings, and in the evenings, I wanted to make him dinner. Sit with him out on the porch or in the patio and watch Nathan play with his toys while we talked about the future. That had always been my favorite topic of conversation with my father, the future, the dreams that we both dreamed. But he would have none of it. He made no effort to connect with me or my little boy, and though it hurt, I let him be. I told myself it was better that way, to keep our distance. If I didn't see him, I could pretend he wasn't here. I could continue to live my life the way I had been living it ever since I moved out of his house. I could continue to pretend that I didn't need him, that I had never needed his love. Because I wouldn't accept money for him for rent, he started to do things around the house. He unclogged the bathroom sink, fixed the leaky faucet, replaced the bad light, pruned my plants, watered the grass. Once, I mentioned that I would like to have a pergola, but not knowing the word in Spanish, I called it a little house, una casita, over the patio. He offered to build the casita for me. I would come out to the patio in the evenings and sit on a bench while he worked. I didn't know what to talk to him about, so I just sat and watched. He measured the wood, then cut it with an electric saw. Little by little, the pergola, the casita, began to take shape. I admired how skillful he was. "Where did you learn to build like that?" I asked him one day. He turned off the drill and told me a story I had never heard before. He said that both his parents were so abusive, constantly beating him and insulting him, that one day, when he was 17, he couldn't take it anymore, and he ran away to Mexico City. I try to picture that boy and how much courage it must have taken to leave our hometown of Iguala, Guerrero, and go to the big city where he knew no one, where everything was different. The tall buildings, the wide paved streets, the cars, the metro, the millions of people. It must have been a scary place for a young country boy like him with a third-grade education, having known no life outside of Iguala's dirt roads and fields and shacks. He was lucky, he said. He found a job in construction, and that was where he learned how to build, how to use his hands to lay brick and tile, to stir mortar, to measure and cut, to hammer and drill, to survive. "And then what happened?" I asked. "How did you end up back in Iguala?" "My father came to look for me," he replied. "He came to take me home, so I returned, but I told him that if he ever laid a hand on me again, that would be the last time he ever saw me." He resumed the drilling, and I knew the conversation was over. I thought about that dream house my father wanted to build for us in Mexico, the reason why he had headed to the US. If he had the money to buy the material, he could have built us the house with his own hands. He wouldn't have had to leave us behind in Mexico for the 8 years that it took him to build us that house. He could have stayed with us, not broken up our family. Maybe then there would be no distance between us. Maybe then I would have been able to talk to him some more and not feel awkward doing it. For the several days he worked on my casita, I sat there and watched. He never told me any more stories about his past. I sat there, and as the pergola began to take shape, I pretended that he was building us another dream house, just like the one in Mexico. I pretended that he was going to stay with me forever, that this time he would never leave me again. A few days later, he told me that he and my stepmother were moving back to LA and buying a house. I'll hurry up so I can finish the casita before I move out, he said. Soon, he was gone. I came out to the patio and looked at the pergola, the casita. If it weren't for that, I would have felt that it was just a dream that my father had lived here with me. And as I stood there, the casita rising above me, I realized that for the second time in my life, my father had built me a house, but not a home. Thank you. All right, want to do the panel? Thank you so much. I think now we're gonna move on to the panel with the students. So how's this gonna work? I'm more curious about the painting. How's it going?
We can move that. Does she need to move, Alyssa?
Can you see,
That's fine.
you see me? Yeah. All right. So how's this gonna work?
Well, you have over here Rosa Reyes. Um, I like to call a dreamer, yes. And then Erica Robles, one of my English students from English 101. And then Martha Lopez, also from English 101. And Martha's daughter, Elaine Halleck, a 10-year-old fifth grader at Santa Clara.
Wow.
And she has read your book, and she's on Twitter with you, and she's been.
Oh yeah.
So she'll have some good questions for you, and
Nice.
start with
Does this one? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Rosa Reyes. I am a first-year Dream student here at Oxnard College. I am also the vice president of the Oxnard College OC Dreamers Club for students and allies. Reyna, I commend you for all of your success, first and foremost. And my question for you is, in many cases, we see young, undocumented students who are living in a dysfunctional or abusive home. How would you encourage these young minds to continue their pursuit for their dreams when they are constantly emotionally let down and their legal status has made them feel as if their voice has been silenced?
Yeah, that's a really difficult experience because not only do you feel that the people that you're closest to are failing you, but then also society at large is failing you because, you know, they're not welcoming. You feel that you don't have the right to be here, or they're constantly pushing you aside and not giving you the support that you need. And I think that that is a very difficult experience. Um, I would say that when I was living through it with the emotional and the physical abuse at home, um, it was hard. You know, it was a challenge every day to get up and kind of pump myself up by trying to tell myself all these positive things. Some of the things I would say is that, you know, it wasn't always gonna be like that. That little by little, I was going to make my way out of that dark tunnel and get out. And I tried to stay focused on the goals that I had, and make a plan of how I was gonna get out of that situation. And a lot of times, you know, when you are in difficult situations, you make rash decisions that sometimes get you deeper in the hole instead of getting you out of the hole. So I would always try to be careful, and I think that that's something that, you know, I would encourage young people to just try to stay focused on the future that you want, on the life that you want. Hold on to that. Hold on to that vision of the life that you want, and do everything you can to work towards that. And it's not gonna happen right away. It's gonna take a lot of work, but you know, you move towards it little by little by staying focused, by making the right choices, um, by holding on to the belief that you are important, and that you deserve happiness, that you deserve to fulfill your life, and to have, you know, a successful life, and just hold on to that, you know, hold on to that vision. And you need to make sure that you stay on track of making the right decisions, and try to not make choices out of desperation, because sometimes you jump out of the, what's that expression, that you jump out of the yeah, that you out of the frying pan into the fire. And so that's kind of what what really helped me, was to just stay focused on where I wanted to end up one day.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Erica Robles. I'm an English student for Mr. Boys. And the question I had you for Miss Reyna was that when you mentioned that in your book, Across a Thousand Mountains, you said that in the story, the father never came back. And instead, the, 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 the main character went looking for her father. Do you think it's because, in a way, the man you imagined to be behind the glass was not the man that managed to bring you and your two siblings here?
Hey, that's pretty good. Eh? You have a good English teacher. That's very insightful. Yeah, I think one of the things I've always felt was that, and I say this also with my mother, that the mother who left was not the mother that came back. And I kind of feel that same way with my dad. You know, the dad who left was not the one who came back. So in a way, like, I explore that idea of the, not just the missing parents, but also the the way the way you lose your parents, you know, whether it's through like a physical distance or the emotional distance. And in Across 100 Mountains, it was like physically the father never came back and abandoned Juana in that sense. But then also the mother, even though the mother never goes anywhere, she also abandons Juana, emotionally and psychologically, and she's totally, you know, gone. So I was exploring the idea of the mother also, the mother who leaves. So I think for me that has always been a big part of my work, because I'm still kind of searching for those parents. And I had this image in my head, that maybe when we crossed the border, somehow a piece of ourselves got stuck there. And sometimes I still picture us running across the border, like if we're like stuck at the border. And that's where my parents really are, like stuck in that no man's land. Because the parents that did come back, they were completely different, and we were never able to really have a good relationship. And I think even to this day, like my father passed away 5 years ago, and I'm still looking for him. I'm still like hungry for his acceptance, for his love. I'm still in that, like, I want to make him proud mode. So like everything I do, it's always about, I'm always wondering, what would my father say? Would he finally be proud of me for 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 what I've done? And with my mother, it's the same. I'm still kind of searching um, for her to change, and to be more involved in my life, and to care a little bit more about what I'm doing. So I'm still kind of juggling with the missing parents, and so there's like this deep void inside of me. And it kind of affects me sometimes too with my children. Um, when, like, my daughter, for example, who's 9 years old, she still wants to crawl into bed with me, and she wants to cuddle, and she wants to be held and told that she's loved. And the other day I couldn't help it, and I said I didn't have a mother to cuddle with, and it just came out, and I didn't want to tell her that. It just came out as I was holding her, that realization, that I didn't have a mother to cuddle with. So sometimes it affects me with my children, my need for to have these loving parents. It impacts the way I am with my children, and I'm constantly comparing my life to theirs. And I think one of the things that I've come to realize also that I'm struggling with is that I was so determined to give my children everything that I didn't have, that now they're like total strangers to me, because they're living a life that is so different from my own, and sometimes I feel like I can relate to them. And I think it's a universal experience, I think, of immigrant parents, raising American-born children who are growing up in a different kind of life, and society and environment, and maybe they have more comforts and luxuries that we didn't have. And so there's that struggle, of trying to understand my children, and sometimes I've been able to. And I'm raising two American middle class children, and that is an experience that I didn't have growing up. So at times there's a distance there between me and my children, that at times it just makes me really sad, and I feel like, how can I overcome that distance when there's so many times when I feel like I can't understand them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you answered all my questions in there.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. No, well, I have a question. When is your abuelita Evila still alive? Not yet. Okay. When you wrote your book, did you find? You say something about you found peace on it, but right now you're saying still that you're still searching for the dad. Is because maybe your dad didn't say he was sorry, or maybe because he didn't recognize, what he did wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with a father who he never acknowledged anything right that we would do. We would come home with straight A's. Right away, he would look at that we were tardy one time, and he'll say, "Why were you tardy?" Instead of saying congratulations on getting straight A's, he'll want to know why we were late. So it was like a constant like battle of doing everything we could possibly do just to make him happy and for him to say, "I'm so proud of you, good job." And those words never came out of his mouth. So the way it's affected me is that I am my hardest critic because I hear that little voice in my head, um, and I keep telling myself I could do better. I could do better than that. And sometimes that kind of affects me because instead of taking pride and being happy on whatever accomplishments I have, I hear my father's voice asking me why I was tardy, and I would tell myself that's not good enough. I have to do better than that. And that's sometimes it affects me because um, then I'm never happy. I can never take happiness and pride in whatever accomplishment I have because I always tell myself, that's not good enough. You gotta do more. You gotta do more. So that's something that I'm struggling with. Yeah, of learning to be happy and to pat myself on the back once in a while and say I did a good job.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elaine Haddox, and I'm a fifth grader at Santa Clara. I noticed that your father was alcoholic, and even when your mother returned, she was like a vase that had been roughly glued together, and she still had missing pieces. And I just wonder, what helped you overcome all of the difficulties?
What helped me? I think I've had some good people in my life, and I call them my coyotes. Like we life. Sometimes we encounter all these borders, right? All kinds of borders, and I've gotten really good at finding coyotes to help me get across those borders. I am very grateful for my sister, for example. My sister Mago. She was she was very, very loving and supportive the whole time that as we were young and struggling through the separation and dealing with our parents and all of these difficult experiences. And I believe that if it hadn't been for her, I would have been damaged more psychologically, emotionally, all of that. I would have been traumatized a lot more. But she tried to protect me from those things, and she helped me to try to get over that and overcome and stay strong. So that was part of it. Also meeting that teacher in college, Diana. That was also another person that life put in my way, and it was because of her that I managed to get through some very difficult moments with my father, and she set me on the right path, of what I needed to do, and she guided me, and she got me to the next step of my life, which was to go to university. And that was a big deal, to find myself there and to know that I had found someone who had helped me reach that point of my journey. And when I was in in Santa Cruz, I met another teacher there who was also very supportive. And for the 3 years that I was there, she was always encouraging me and just being there for me and having someone to talk to and to be able to just share, about all these struggles I was dealing with. That was really helpful too. So I think it's important, that we acknowledge that we cannot do it all on our own. That we don't have to walk this path alone, and that if you just look out and put out a call, right, that you need someone. Sometimes life will send you that person, to help you and guide you. and you just need to be kind of open to it, open to receive that help. And a lot of times we close ourselves up because we feel embarrassed, or we feel that we don't deserve it, or that we feel hopeless, that no, that we're gonna have to face all of this on our own. But yeah, if we could just overcome that fear and look for that help, um, a lot of times you will find someone who will be there for you, give you um, a kind word, or advice that will really um, change you, or take you home like my teacher did. But something like I really do believe that to put out that call when you need the help.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have one more question for you. During your conversation, you mentioned when you were crossing that you leave something of yourself. What is that for you? What aspect of yourself do you feel like you left behind?
Yeah, I feel that as an immigrant, I look at everybody, when everybody talks about immigration, or immigrants coming here, you talk a lot about the things that we gain, right, by coming here. But there's so many things that we lose also along the way. The moment you cross the border, there are things that you have lost that you might never get back. And for me, like, as I think back on those things, like, I think about the fact that, I left a lot of family behind that I don't have a close relationship with anymore because there's a border standing between us. I think about losing my country also because now I go to Mexico and it's no longer mine. I don't know it as well as I do this country, the culture, the society, even geographically. It's like a mystery to me. I don't know it the way I know the U.S. Like, I think I've been to 40 states in the U.S., and Mexico maybe 3. And so even geographically, I've lost it. I don't know it. The language also, I speak English better than I speak Spanish. So when I go down there, everybody, as soon as I open my mouth, everybody's like, "Are you American? You're American." And I'm like, "I'm Mexican." I'm like, "No, you're not Mexican." So then there's that loss. So I'm always thinking about that, right? Like the things that we lose when we come here. And I had this really interesting experience. Last year, I went to Spain, and when I opened my mouth to speak Spanish in Spain, everybody said, "Oh, are you Mexican?" And I was like, "Yes, finally." So I'm thinking about moving to Spain so I could be Mexican over there. But yeah, so I mean, I think as immigrants, we lose things that sometimes we just cannot get back, and it goes back to that idea of home also, where there's a home that you lose that you can never really go home again, and that's something that we need to accept as immigrants, and we try to create a home where we are now, but society might make us feel that we don't belong, and we're constantly fighting for our right to remain. So those are some of the things I feel that we deal with on a daily basis, the loss and the gain. Yeah.
My question is, if you could go back in time and change something, what would you change?
Um, I'm not sure if I would change anything, just because I really like where I am now. And I feel that I am a product of all of those things that happened to me. And if I were to change some of them, I might not be me anymore. I might be somebody else, or be somewhere else. And part of the part of the writing experience that I've had with with my book, especially with the memoir, is that I have come to accept that those things happen, and I have come to stop regretting and to stop fantasizing about having a time machine so I could go back and change those things. And I think that's why, like, when I talk about the book, like, giving me peace and giving me understanding, is that I have gone from constantly thinking about my life in terms of, I should have, I could have, what if, to accepting that those are the things that happen. I am where I am now. I feel like the choices that I made can help me say it was all worth it, and be at peace with that. Be at peace with all those things that happen. Yeah.
We'll have a chance for questions from the audience. I'll take the row over here, and then you can pass it around. After the question and answers, we'll have a chance to have some book signing with Reyna.
Hola, Reina. I actually have your book as one of my finals in my classroom, so thank you so much for sharing your story. When I first read your book, the part that I've been wanting to ask you is the intimate part, the one that you share about your first time, and how is it that you are able to put that in a book that you know that millions of people are going to read?
I don't know.
We already know it. You already shared it.
Right. I was really good at like lying to myself that no one was gonna read my book, and I seriously believe that. Like, I don't know. I had to tell myself that in order to write everything I wrote, right? And then I remember, like, right before the book was gonna go to press, my publisher's lawyer called me and said, we need to talk about what's in your book because I don't want you getting sued. And that was the first time when I was like, oh, shoot, somebody's going to read my book and sue me. And yeah, but it was that realization by then that, yes, people were going to read my book. But I had already written everything, and we only took out the things that needed to be taken out so that I wasn't going to get sued. But I don't know. I mean, I think when you write a memoir, you are signing up for being brutally honest and basically, like, getting naked and exposing yourself in a way you never thought you would. You know what I mean? But if you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't write a memoir. Then you should go write a novel or something. So it requires that honesty, and it requires for you to really get over your fear of exposing yourself and making yourself really vulnerable, because that is the way a memoir is supposed to be written. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be writing one. And there are other ways, the other things you can write, that you can still write about experiences without making yourself so vulnerable in that way. So that's kind of what I told myself. Yeah. But that's not in the young readers version. They made me take it out. Yeah, it was
You
funny
may have
because
answered my question.
my son, who's 15, he read the young readers version when it came out last year, and then a few weeks ago he was asking me about when I lost my virginity, and I said, well, didn't you read my book? I'm like, go read my book so I don't have to talk to you about it. And then he's like, well, I read your book, but I read the young reader's version. I'm all like, well, go read the other one. And let's not have this conversation. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I think you answered my question. My question was going to be why you selected a memoir, being young like you are, instead of doing a novel, which you could have potentially done the same thing. But having answered that in your discussion here, do you look forward to another memoir? Your life's evolving, and your character's going to change.
Yeah, well, the thing, like, memoir is different from autobiography. Autobiography is really the story of your whole life, right? Like, that's an autobiography, which maybe, yeah, I'm too young to write an autobiography. But a memoir is about a specific time in your life. It could even be a summer of your life. That's a memoir, about a particular summer that was very important in your life, where so many things happen. So that's a memoir. Like, it's more limited. So, for example, The Distance Between Us, it's a coming of age memoir. So it just deals with my childhood and my young adulthood, and that's how I framed it, just capturing that moment of my life. And then this new one that I'm working on right now, it's about the next 10 years of my life. And that's all I'm writing about, the next 10 years. So maybe, I don't know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if I want to write another memoir, I could write another memoir. And each memoir has its own theme. So you could actually write, I mean, there's writers who all they write is memoir, and they've written several of them, because every memoir has a specific theme that you're covering. Whereas an autobiography, you only write one autobiography once, because that's the story of your life. So that's the difference, yeah. So anybody could write a memoir, no matter how young you are. Like she could write her memoir right now about the first 10 years of her life. And so I think it's memoir. It's a pretty interesting form to explore. Yeah.
Hello, I have a question. My name is Felix, and first of all, thank you for being here and for taking time to talk to us. But my question isn't so much about your book, it's more as an author. Lots of authors, or in English classes, we like to talk about the author's work, and sometimes there's a lot of hidden meanings in what they write. So I was wondering if, for you as an author, do you intentionally put those hidden meanings in, or do they just pop out?
Well, I don't know how to answer that without you losing respect for me. 'Cause I didn't mean any of it. How about that? Like, no, but it's interesting because in like in English class, the way the teachers and the students analyze a work, they read so much into it, and it seems like the writer knew exactly what they were doing. And I know in my case, I think sometimes there are things there that I didn't even know were in there. But it makes me sound good. So let's pretend that I knew what I was doing, and that's why it came out that way. But there was that experience, like with Across 100 Mountains. I remember I was talking to a class where they told me about the moon metaphor and what a good job I did, bringing in that moon metaphor. And I didn't even realize I had done it. And there was but there is a moon. I know there's a moon metaphor in the book, but there's also a character, that one of the main characters, his name is Dr. Luna. And I didn't intentionally name him Dr. Luna because there was a moon metaphor in my book. I named him Dr. Luna because my sister was going out with a guy whose last name was Luna. And as I was trying to find a name for my character, like, his name just popped out, so that's what I named my character. But it wasn't intentional, and it wasn't until that English class pointed it out that I realized that there was the Luna, the moon, in the book. But I told them I did do it on purpose, just so that they thought I was a good writer. But it wasn't.
I have a two-part question. The first part is, how long did you teach for LAUSD, and what was your writing schedule and process like then? And then the second part is, because I assume you're no longer teaching, is that what is your writing schedule and process like now?
Well, I still have nightmares of my job at LAUSD. Oh wait, you're recording that. Can you delete I said that? Yeah. It was really hard for me working at LAUSD because when I graduated from Santa Cruz, I graduated with a degree in creative writing, which to my surprise did not prepare me for our job. And while I was studying creative writing, all I kept thinking was my dream of being a writer and, publishing my stories and all of that. So that I graduated with my head up in the clouds. And then I entered the real world, and I realized that I didn't have any skills to get a job, and creative writing does not get you a job. And also, one of the things, to my disappointment, was that in my classes we never talked about the business side of writing. So I didn't know how to get an agent. I didn't know how to find an editor. I didn't know anything about getting my work published. All I knew was craft, and that's all we focused on, craft. But craft is only part of the job of being a writer. So I was really missing that very essential knowledge of how do I get published. So I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't find a job, and I went to live with my brother, and I was sleeping on his couch for 6 months trying to find work, and I couldn't find work. And my friends, they started getting jobs at LAUSD because at the time there was a teacher shortage, and they were hiring anybody that had a BA, anybody. And I spent 6 months trying to find a job in the career I wanted, and I couldn't find it. So then I walked into LAUSD one day out of desperation, and I got a job in 2 hours as a middle school teacher. And they threw me into this school in South Central LA. In the middle of the school year, it was January by now, and the students had about 5 different substitutes by then. So when I got there, I didn't even know how to fill out a roster. I had never taken an education class that wasn't what I knew how to do or what I wanted to do. So it was really hard. Let me put it that way. It was so hard to try to be a teacher when I didn't know how to be a teacher, especially middle school. Middle school, it's horrible. And I didn't have the personality for it either. Like, I like college students. Middle school, young kids, like, you need to entertain them too much, and I didn't have the personality. So anyway, it was really hard for me. So I stuck it out for 4 years, and you asked me what I wrote. I wrote nothing in those 4 years, nothing. I was so depressed. I was like struggling so hard to try to do the job that I was hired to do, and I didn't know how to do it, and I was just completely drained. So I didn't write for 3 years, and then one day I had a really awful day at work, and I looked at my future, and it just seemed like this bleak, dark future, and I said, that was not the dream. Where's my dream? Where did my dream go? And I realized that my dream of being a writer was slowly escaping. I had let it go during that time because I was struggling too hard to be a grown-up and have a real job. And I decided I wasn't gonna let my dream go. So I signed up for a creative writing class at UCLA Extension. It was a weekend class. I signed up for a class to try to get back into writing. And at that class, I met a teacher, Maria Amparo Escandon, who told me about this fellowship called Emerging Voices for Aspiring Writers of Color. And she said, Reyna, you should apply to Emerging Voices, but the deadline is this Friday. So I only had 5 days to put my writing sample together, my application. I had to call Diana. I had to call my teacher from Santa Cruz to send me the letters of recommendation. And Diana actually met me at the post office that Friday to give me the letter so that I could put it in the envelope and send it off. And then I got a call back a few weeks later saying that they wanted to interview me, that I had made it to the 25 finalists, and I went for my interview, and I prayed to my abuelita to, you know, help me get accepted, and then I got in, and I guess I was chosen as a fellow, and then through Emerging Voices, I found an agent, and my agent found me a publisher. And within like a year, it was like magic, you know, like within a year after that very dark moment in my life when I thought my dream had escaped me, within a year, I had an agent, I had a book deal, I had made it to where I needed to go, and I was able to leave my middle school job and go pursue my dream. Yeah. So it was magic. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. I was wondering if you had just a few pieces of advice on the creative life in the long haul, you know, on aspiring creatives of any sort. What has helped you, whether it's in terms of structuring your creativity or otherwise?
Well, I think when I speak to new writers, one of the things I try to really like get them to understand is that the writing is only half of the battle. You know, when you wanna make it as a writer and have a career as a writer, you really need to work hard at promoting yourself and doing the business side of writing, and accepting that, you know, that there's two parts to being a writer. One is being a creator, being an artist, and when you write a book, you know, you're creating a work of art, and it's beautiful and fulfilling and all of that. But when it gets published, it becomes a product, and it has a price tag on it. You know, now it's $16 for your book. It's a product. So now you have to make that switch from being a creator, being an artist, to now you are a salesperson, and you have to move this product. And the thing with writing is that, you know, it's a numbers game, and and so much depends on your book sales. And if you don't work hard, you have to work just as hard on the writing as you do on the publicity, you know, and promoting and selling your book. Because if you don't do that, then the numbers are gonna be low, and that's gonna affect whether or not your next book gets published, and whether or not you are gonna have a career as a writer. So I always encourage young writers, you know, to make sure that all the time they spend so much time with the craft, but they also need to make sure that they spend some time learning about the business side and having a plan. You know, what's your plan? How are you gonna get the word out, you know, about your work, about your books? How are you gonna reach your readers, and make sure that you get the sales going, because that's really, really important. And I've had several friends who started out at the same time I did, publishing, and they didn't work very hard on promoting themselves and selling their books, and eventually their publishers told them that they should just self-publish because they weren't gonna keep publishing them, and that's a really hard thing to be told, as a writer. So yeah, so make sure that you put a lot of energy into the business side because that's really important.
May I ask a follow-up on that? Did that having to transition into that role change the way you understood yourself? In terms of, I mean, I'm a painter, and I feel like part of my understanding of myself has to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if that's something that you had to experience and grow into, is like reconciling those two things and what you learned about yourself in the process.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a process because we as artists don't think that way. That's not how we approach our art. But if that's gonna be a career, and you wanna make a living off your art, then you need to start thinking of it that way. And it's hard, but you have to. Yeah. And I think for me, I just feel really blessed that I've been able to make a living off my art. Like I'm like 100% full-time writer. And I really love that. I feel like I've been very lucky, but it wasn't given to me. I've been pounding the pavement for 10 years. This right now, I'm seeing the rewards, and I'm reaping what I sowed 10 years ago. And it wasn't handed to me. It wasn't, just given to me. I've been working extremely hard at it for the past 10 years. And I'm gonna keep doing that, Yeah.
When you wrote your memoir, were you writing it for the intentions of thinking like, students will be able to read this, or professors will be able to use this, or in their classrooms? Was that ever in the back of your mind guiding you in how you put chapter by chapter? Because you have a lot of history in there, because I use it for my Chicano studies class, and it's perfect. And I'm like, man, was she planning this out? Were you planning for it to be used in that way? Because you're talking about promoting it, and obviously it's used within institutions. So was that in the back of your mind?
Not at first. I think for me, I wanted to write the book for personal reasons, and it was a story that I had carried inside of me that needed to come out. And once I wrote it, and once I, gave it to my editor, and we began the publication process, that's when those thoughts started coming in, because they ask you those questions. Like, they give you this big questionnaire of, who is the audience for this book? Where do you see your book being taught? How can we promote this book? And then they ask you for a list of like people that they should reach out to, that, so then I gave them a list of a bunch of teachers, like Chicano studies teachers. I was like, here, you contact them. And but so it's the publisher that gets you thinking that way, like, where is this book gonna end up? But I think that in order to write an honest book, you have to put those thoughts aside and really focus on the story, and bringing the story to life as best as you can, and then after, you can start thinking about where is this book gonna go, and whose hands is it gonna, end up. But that's a total different conversation that you need to have afterwards. But like I said, it's, you know, it's that combination of art and business, and how do you navigate both of those things. And I've had some I had a lot of help in terms of, you know, how to promote myself. I'm really good friends with Sonia Nazario, who wrote Enrique's Journey, and her book has done extremely well, and she is a machine. You know, she knows how to promote herself. She is yeah, she's tireless. She just goes and goes and goes, and she travels all over the country, and she's constantly speaking everywhere about her work, and I have learned a lot from her on how to do it. So yeah, I think it's been really rewarding, especially when I meet students who tell me that, you know, that my book helped them understand, that they saw themselves in my book, you know, and I think that's really empowering when you see yourself in a book. It makes you feel that your story does matter, that you do exist, yeah, you are part of the fabric of the society because your experience is in a book. And to me, that's very rewarding, you know, to know that I'm having this impact on young people, and especially to be able to inspire them and encourage them to overcome whatever obstacles life puts in their way, and to hold on to their dreams, to stay focused on what they need to do for themselves, and to, you know, fight for their right to have to reach their full potential.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Cynthia Zari. I'm the president of Oxnard College, and I want to officially welcome you. But thank you. That was a fascinating story, hearing about your journey. And I especially like that you talked about the business aspects that artists need to be familiar with. And if you are a writer or an artist, I would encourage you to take an entrepreneurship class. We offer those classes here in our business programs. I also want to call your attention to a young artist here. I don't know if you knew, but there was a young artist here who was painting your portrait as you spoke. And as I listened to you and I watched her, I was amazed because she certainly captured you. So thank you again for coming. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Want to show us your painting? Reyna, you want to show us your painting that is coming out into the open here?
I just first want to say I'm really blessed to be here, and it was just an honor to be able to paint you while you spoke. You spoke very beautifully, and you have an amazing talent, and we're all really blessed to have you here at Oxnard College, and I hope you keep writing, because your writing is really heartfelt, and it helps people connect, and that's something we need more in.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and you want to come with me to all my talks? I have like 25 talks coming up. You can do one every time. Wow, this is gorgeous. Thank you. Yeah, if you guys want to come look at it, should I hold it here and then people can come take a look? Or
we're going to
or
close
where
up
should we
here.
put
She's
it?
going to sign some books, and and thank you, panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Reyna, and thank you, Alas. Thank you, President, and thank you, Elise. If you have some more questions, feel free to come up and ask them. And then, if you'd like to have a book signed, we have some books I think are out in the foyer as well that are available to be purchased. Thank you for coming.
So we're back here at 6:30.
I don't think it is out there. I never even thought about that. I don't know. It's a bookstore that people did across the 100 mountains. Rosa, you mind